Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Tony Uvi. Tony is the CEO of VerSprite, an information security consulting practice that has been in business for nearly 25 years. And he also co-authored the book Risk-Centric Threat Modeling, which delves on the topic of risk-based threat modeling technology. And Tony also founded VS Staffing, a talent cultivation incubator to find top IT and information security talent. And he also ran the Atlanta chapter for a group called OWASP. So, Tony, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast today.
It's great to be here. It's a great honor. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to address your audiences.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure to hear your story and discuss ways you manage cybersecurity and also about your book. So I believe that we'll have a thoughtful conversation on the topic of your book, a risk-centric threat modeling, and we'll also perhaps discuss more about finding talent in the risk in the cybersecurity space. So before that, Tony, could you please tell us a short story about yourself, your career path, and what brought you to where you are right now, and perhaps in a few words, what you guys are at VerSprite up to this day.
Sure. My origin story begins in 1994 as a freshman at Cornell. I worked at a computer lab for 4 years, majored in international finance, and went into the dot-com era as a systems engineer. So I started out my career in IT, and I did system engineering, network administration, software development. So I picked up a lot of functional IT roles, and then I transitioned to security. And I worked for a couple different both large product security companies and managed security service firms. And then I started to work for the enterprise, a top 10 US bank and a Fortune 50 organization. And I left that to start VerSprite. And VerSprite today is a global cybersecurity firm. We're based out of Atlanta, but we have global clients in 4 continents and over 12 different countries. And we have a global team in Buenos Aires and Barcelona and Atlanta, but we're spread throughout. And as a company, we're really focusing on a lot of risk. In fact, the original slogan to VerSprite, which is a unique name, it means true spirit, but the original slogan to VerSprite was navigate beyond risk. So it coincides very much with the theme of your program on global risk, is that we wanted to create a consulting firm that really understood what was the core residual risk issues that our clients need to worry about so that they could prioritize risk remediation, risk response, right, risk treatment. And but today, we serve over 400 plus global customers. We are independently owned, and we have zero debt and no VC, so we stay true to our mission, so that we don't have any sort of like risks to financial debtors and things like that. But we're operating within the cybersecurity space, and it's very much exciting times now with the advent of AI and automation.
Absolutely, it's fantastic. So let's start with your book. Can you provide a brief overview of what risk-centric threat modeling is and how it differs from other approaches to threat modeling in cybersecurity?
Yeah, very absolutely. So Risk-Centric Threat Modeling was published in 2015 under Wiley Life Sciences in New York. And it's really 2 books in one. So the first part of the book, the co-author and myself, Marco Morana and I were both OWASP leaders, which is an open worldwide application security project, over 60,000 global members. And he was a SVP at a very large financial institution. And at that time, I was, I think, a couple of years into having started VerSprite. So we came up with this methodology. We said it would be great to create a model of threats for applications that was risk-centric, meaning that for the product owner or the application owner, what is the most important things that they should focus on based upon the viability of a risk actually happening and the impact that it would have on the application or the business itself. So the difference between, so like I said, the book it's 2 books in one. The first half of it is just general, what is threat modeling? The second half of it is the introduction of a risk-centric approach called PASTA. And PASTA is an acronym that stands for Process for Attack Simulation and Threat Analysis. So in the second half of the book, we're really focusing on a true methodology, and it's a 7-step methodology that walks the reader through how do you do risk-centric threat models. So that's really the second part of the book. Now, what's different about it compared to other methodologies? Well, there's a couple of things. So in threat modeling space, there is a mnemonic called STRIDE. It was invented many years ago, adopted by Microsoft in the early 1990s. And it basically says, let's make a model that addresses spoofing, tampering of data, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and elevation of privileges. Fast forward to 2023, it's the same thing. So the contention with PASTA as the risk-centric threat modeling approach that says, build your own threat library, right? So for example, and today, there's a lot of banks worldwide that are being extorted through ransomware, right? You can't put ransomware into one of those silos. And overall, logically, there isn't any sense into having something that's so dated to be something that's so relevant when threats are very dynamic and they're changing all the time. The other major difference really on the threat modeling approach is that PASTA, as a risk-centric approach, looks at the full technology stack. STRIDE typically looks at software, is looking at a threat model for the software or for the application. Today, we have to realize that software is interacting with cloud components, is interacting with underlying platforms, third-party applications. So there's a lot of interconnectivity, and we look at a broader base of the attack surface. So those are some of the distinguishing qualities between PASTA, again, the world's only risk-centric approach to threat modeling.
Okay, so in risk-centric threat modeling, there's understanding of critical assets and vulnerabilities is crucial, as I understand. So how do organizations effectively identify and prioritize their most critical assets and potential vulnerabilities in this context of threat modeling?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of the reasons why Marco and I developed the framework, is to be able to contextualize what a lot of individuals in multinational companies were receiving in terms of security data. So let's go through an example real quick. So let's say that you're a product owner for a bank in Western Europe, and you have a lending application. Today, in the security industry, the owner of that lending application will receive reports that their software is insecure through code analysis, that the application is insecure through dynamic analysis, that there are third-party libraries that are insecure through software composition analysis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that security groups within an organization are telling a product owner, in this example, the product owner for a mortgage application in a bank, and saying that you're vulnerable. What a threat model does is, under PASTA, is to be able to contextualize all of the aforementioned, saying, okay, if you have these weaknesses, how do they fit to realizing the threat that we're defining for you? With mortgage applications, you can say one threat is that I want to affect the integrity of interest rate data, right? And so what is the viability of me doing that in the application model? Is there something that can be done programmatically as an abuse? But all of these threats that we define in the model will reconcile to the things that the product owner is receiving in terms of vulnerabilities and dynamic application security vulnerabilities and weaknesses and things like that. Before this type of threat modeling, a lot of the product owners were having to literally have stacks of vulnerabilities that they can't go through. It's too much, right? Just doing one type of thing like a pen test, a penetration test to the mortgage application in the bank might introduce, dozens of different findings. Which one do you work on first? Why do you work on one first versus the other? Risk prioritization typically in the industry is driven by, different types of criteria on the variable in the risk equation, like a vulnerability. So if I run a pen test and I am able to get in, I will put that as a super high. But where is the context of the value of what I just took over? If I'm able to defeat a part of the application, am I able to get the information? What is the part of the overall architecture that maybe isn't being factored in? Oftentimes, with threat modeling, what we're doing is we're adding context. We're adding context to the product owner to say, you care about information loss, you care about continuity, you care about regulatory fines. What you want to know is how all these vulnerabilities and possible attacks come together to align to a threat model. And that's really what the premise behind PASTA was.
Mm-hmm. So I believe that cyber landscape cybersecurity landscape is constantly evolving. And how does this approach and risk-centric threat modeling adopt to changes in the threat landscape? And what strategies should organization employ to stay proactive in identifying this and mitigated emergent trends?
Well, yeah, one of the great distinguishing things about this particular framework of PASTA is that it's looking and ingesting in terms of threat data, threat intel, right? So there's 7 stages to PASTA. The 4th stage is called threat analysis. And I could come up as a threat analyst and say, I believe that this mortgage application will be susceptible to injection-based attacks with their interest rate calculator. But what's good with being able to take in threat intelligence is to be able to see what is happening to other banks worldwide. What is happening to banks in Asia Pacific? What is happening to banks in Latin America? What types of incidents are occurring that are taking maybe advantage of components within the attack surface of my application that I'm threat modeling in Western Europe, right? So there's no other threat modeling methodology that is asking for information from other types of sources within an enterprise. So in stage 4 of PASTA, it's called threat analysis, and this is where you develop a threat library. The threat library is substantiated by threat intel, advisory reports, industry reports in terms of what's going on, maybe some campaigns of malicious actors that are deliberately targeting mortgage lending applications or banking applications. But it also factors in threat data, which is a term that we use in the book to be able to talk about infrastructure that you're running at the bank that is maybe having like alarms go off. Oftentimes when security people are using other approaches, they're not factoring in what is the environment saying. Here you have an environment, right? It's receiving all types of legitimate traffic and illegitimate traffic all the time. Why wouldn't you, pull out or leverage the information that's saying that you might have a problem, right? And so in the military, they do this, right? In fact, PASTA was inspired by a lot of ballistic threat modeling that's done in the military. So that's where it gets a lot of its inspiration and roots from. But the actual book itself, by the way, the cybersecurity czar of the White House actually wrote the preamble of the book because he was under the Obama administration. He was the general, Howard Schmidt, was the cybersecurity czar of the White House appointed by President Obama. And he really did believe in this risk-centric approach, right? Because he saw the roots of like ballistic threat modeling as an inspiration to this type of application threat modeling as a way to establish credibility to the model. So in short, the way that we ingest, you're right, the cyber threat landscape is evolving. You need to be able to feed your model with the latest types of attacks, trends, campaigns, threat actors, threat attribution data that can substantiate some of the threat claims that you have in the threat model.
All right, fantastic. I would like to ask you a personal point of view. What is the major misconception in the field of cybersecurity that you strongly disagree with?
Well, we could be here for weeks. Let me pick the top one. So I think there's, I'll present two different distinct kind of major things that I think there are impeding cybersecurity advancements, overall. Number one is the auditor approach. Let me explain. So security professionals that are working for any type of industry are oftentimes, they're becoming familiarized with best practices, control frameworks, things that international regulations say that you have to do for implementing cryptography, for having the right type of access control, having the right type of hardening that you do against a technological platform, that they lose the spirit of thinking like a criminal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're trying, the police, for example, just to kind of take a human example, they oftentimes have to think about criminal behavior, and you have people on the staff that study criminology and things like that. In the cybersecurity space, it's a lot of this auditor mentality. Like, do you have this? Check. Do you have this? Check. And it's not really with the right psyche. So that's one major problem, because as you already know, there's a lot of a lack of resources in this space. There's not enough people that are qualified, and the people that are there are oftentimes having the same type of approach. Now, the other major complaint that I see is having a macro effect on the industry, especially in the United States, because unlike in Europe and Asia Pacific, they're really much aligned to good process, processes that are well aligned and well developed and well thought out. In the United States, there's a lot of solving problems, especially in cybersecurity, with tools. Oh, I don't want to get hacked. Let me put something in front of this. Problem solved. And that's not the case. There's this idea that technology alone, without good process, is going to actually mitigate, cyber threats. And so, I think that the industry is basically in a tailspin, where you have a lot of companies that are interested in developing great technology, and then they get funded by venture capitalists, and then they lose the focus of trying to make a change in the impact. What they're focusing on now is an exit strategy as a company to make millions of dollars, to get a valuation that is sometimes 30 times annual reoccurring revenue. And they start to lose focus on true product development, and so it becomes more of a business opportunity than actually making a change. But right now in cybersecurity, we have governments, we have personnel data, we have financial data, insurance data. Now we have biometric data, we have our medical records, right? That there is we're well beyond a point of urgent concern. And unfortunately, a lot of the players that are in this space are unfortunately just in it for a quick entry and a quick exit, especially in the tool space. So that's a kind of a major concern I have for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you some quick questions for maybe good for some headlines. What is your go-to move for staying cyber safe in 3 words, or maybe more? Let's just.
Well, so to stay safe in cyber?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just stick to one. I'll say one word, and that's context. So the number one attack vector in cybersecurity threats at a commercial and consumer level is attacks via, our mobile phones, smishing attacks, phishing attacks, vishing attacks, and they're going to get a lot more sophisticated with the introduction of deep fakes and AI. So context of the request, right, is going to be our saving grace. It's not going to be a technology, right? Because let's say, Boris, that you have a very close friend of yours, and they live in the Netherlands, and their name is, Frank. And, at some point, it's very easy for someone to collect the voice samples of Frank,
Mm-hmm.
to also find public records of pictures of Frank, where they could do a voice call with Frank's likeness of voice, and make a request to you that is, asking you to do something, right? Maybe trying to introduce an element of fear, of desperation, so that you could help them out, maybe send a PayPal transfer or something like that. So context is the thing that helps out end users to be able to say, okay, this might be Frank, but let me communicate with this person or interact with them. It could be a bank. So Frank could be a bank. Frank could be a retail store. Frank could be a government office, right? You always want to be able to ask yourself, does this sound like it's expected? Does this sound something that is reflective of the nature of the person or entity that's asking me that information? And last, let me validate things out of band. So do not use any of the information that's been presented to you via your phone, email, whatever, and find another medium to validate with that person over with different sources of information in terms of contacts. That will be very valuable in defense for any type of ploy against you as a person or as a small entity or business entity.
Yeah, we had some CEO fraud with kind of this quick emails. We need some quick payment, and
right,
very famous in the Netherlands a few years. Yeah. So and also with this deep voice AI, there have been some the people trying some to scam some even serious lawyers. Yeah, I saw some videos. Yeah. So another question, a quick firefight question. What is your one quick tip to turn a potential risk into a win?
Well, it depends on if we're talking about an application or I would say overall, let's talk about application security. So in order to get a something that's proven to be a great advice, when you're building software, oftentimes the software architecturally has something that's called implicit trust. And what this means is that you have, let's say, multiple parts of an application and they're communicating with one another. Oftentimes in that communication, there's a level of implicit trust. Let me provide an example. So Boris, you and I met over this podcast. Great. We have a level of trust enough to share information about risk topics, etc. But you may not, well, you may not trust me with your wallet or the keys to your house or things like that, right? In application security calls, you want to be able to ensure that any call, nowadays, this is super important. You have to be able to look at your application model and eradicate out anything that's implied trust. I know Boris and Boris knows my friend Tom, so therefore I trust Boris. That's implicit trust. And you don't want to do that in application security. So that's one, I think, major overlooked area that if a lot of listeners out there are in the product security, product development space, this is a great win to really incorporate.
All right, fantastic. So, Tony, I know that you are also working in the HR company, right? You are hiring people, staffing in the cybersecurity. So maybe can you give us one of your golden nugget of career advice of how to keep people can branch to break out into cybersecurity space?
Yes. So I am the owner of a staffing company called VS Staffing, and it is labeled a talent cultivator because we're trying to cultivate talent versus just simply find talent. And getting into cybersecurity, I think it's actually a lot easier than what it's depicted online. The hardest part about getting into cybersecurity is finding somebody that's going to give you a chance, for sure. That is the hardest thing about getting into cybersecurity. In running VerSprite for the past 16 years as a consulting firm, we have definitely given a lot of individuals an opportunity to be able to be challenged, right? To be able to tackle new things that, in working for a large organization, I know myself firsthand that you're hired into a very large organization, and there's not a lot of chances that you have to be able to expand your knowledge base, to try out new things, and that can be very frustrating. So, the way to get into that is to, the classic recommendation of networking, right? So if you're somebody that has a strong level of perseverance and you are a self-starter, a self-learner, initiation and taking that initiation and showing some level of initiative, there's a lot of opportunities today in the global community of technology and security where you can really go from, nothing to something very quickly. Let me provide an example that's very might be useful to some of the college students out there. So if you're looking to get into cybersecurity or transition into it, or grow into it, check out the Open Worldwide Application Security Project. That's OWASP.org. This is, again, a nonprofit. The whole mission of the group is to improve application security, and there's all these technical projects. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, I don't code, Tony. So does that mean I'm out? Well, no, it doesn't. A lot of these projects that have their source code on GitHub, they need leaders that are doing technical writing. They need presenters. They need people to QA the code. They need individuals to be able to help provide maybe some feature requests. So once you have your name associated with the project and work with some of the more technical people, you're going to learn. So putting yourself in a position, my golden rule, one of my golden rules in life, especially for professional development, is once you start getting comfortable, then that's when you're going to notice that the blade of the sharpness of your blade as a metaphorical representation to your skills is going to get dull. You always want to be uncomfortable, right? Always want to be constantly, in this day and age, with all the different technology sets and evolutions in terms of technology, software development, cybersecurity, you have to, be comfortable being uncomfortable. And it's not for everyone, but there's plenty of opportunities to be able to jump in. And it begins with the classic things of networking, being able to be out there, creating relationships. The OWASP community is phenomenal. There's Slack channels, free, Discord channels, free, and you can jump in, listen, ask questions, partake, make connections on LinkedIn, and then expand, right, and dive deeper into those relationships so that you can partake in projects.
All right, fantastic. So if we summarize our interview, if for someone who is listening to this would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would it be?
Well, I would say, there's two things, just to kind of frame up, in the realm of risk, in the realm of cybersecurity risk, there's a framework out there that's called PASTA, and it's the only risk-centric threat modeling framework. It's a true methodology, 7 stages. Each stage has multiple activities. If you're interested who's working with it, well, multiple multinational companies, and Google PASTA and GitLab. GitLab has adopted it, wrote a phenomenal piece about how they adopted PASTA as their de facto threat modeling methodology. But if you're interested about really substantiating threats to your application and feeding it with information that you might already have, take a look at PASTA, Google PASTA Threat Modeling. There's an ebook that's for free on VerSprite.com. Take a listen, take a look. There's a lot of how-to training videos. There's a video out there that has close to 25,000 views on YouTube that walks through the training. It's free. And it's a hot area. So, this is a good segue into my second point and takeaway, which is if you want to get into the industry and you want to have an opportunity to stand out, definitely think about becoming a threat modeling evangelist. And because there's a lot of companies that are needing this type of skill set, and PASTA provides a very good holistic methodology that you could run with and speak on. And I think it's going to add a distinguishing feather to your overall beginning career in cybersecurity or technology.
All right, great. So, Tony, that were all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot to ask you something that you will like benefit our audience, please go ahead.
No, I would just say, if you have, some interest in the ebook, there is a great ebook that's available on VerSprite.com. I definitely invite you to look at the YouTube channel that's on for VerSprite. That's also available on the site. There's a lot of instructional videos that kind of walk through some training step by step on how to use PASTA. And overall, as a big risk enthusiast, it's a unique skill to be able to convey, risk issues, quantify risk, qualify risk, and talk about risk treatment. So it's been a pleasure to be able to speak with you, Boris, and share this with the community.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Tony, for your very thoughtful interview, and I wish you great success with you personally and your companies, several companies, right?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Boris. Likewise
Thank
to you, and stay in touch.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.